All right, first graders, we're going to be going over all of the trick words in Unit 12 and talking about the tricky parts and marking them up so we can remember these words easier. So let's start with the word people. Can you say that? Good. All right, let's tap out the sounds we hear. P, E, P, O. So the first sound we hear is a P. P. That's not a tricky part. Next we hear E. And this is a tricky part. It's E, O. So I'm marking that with a heart. P, E, P. That is just the letter P again, not tricky. And then we hear O, which is the letter L, followed by a silent E. So remember, we can cross out that E since we don't hear it. So that is how we spell people. P-E-O-P-L-E. The tricky parts are E-O saying E and the silent E at the end. All right, the next one is the word month. Can you say that? Good, let's tap it out. So the first sound, that's the letter M, not a tricky part. Then we hear which is usually a U, but in the word month, it is an O. So since that's a tricky part, let's mark it with a heart. And then the rest of the word is easy, no more tricky parts, only that O saying So this is an easy one. Is the digraph TH, month. So as long as you remember that that O is saying you're good to go on spelling month. All right, the next tricky part is bin. Let's tap that out. B-I-N. So this word, B, starts with the letter B, which makes sure you're making the B face the right way, or else it's going to be wrong because it will be a D. B-I. So this is the tricky part. E is saying I. We know E normally says E, but not in this word. It's saying I. And the last sound, N, not a tricky part. It's just the letter N. So the only tricky part in bin is the E, saying I. All right, the next word, little. Can you say that? Good, let's tap it out. O. So it starts with an L. And then I is saying I. And then here's the tricky part. We hear T, which is a T like normal, but it's going to be two T's doubled up. O-I-T. So let's put a heart under that. O. Now think about the word people. What came at the end? An E that we do not hear, and we can cross right out. So in little, the tricky parts are the two T's and then the silent E at the end. All right, we have four more. Say the word want. Good, let's tap it out. So it's going to start with a W, just like we hear, it's not tricky. And then the again is going to be the tricky sound. It's not a U, it is going to be an A. So let's mark that. Is N and T just like we hear. So the only tricky part in want is the A. Good job. All right, our next two trick words are really important ones because you use these a lot at school or when you're meeting an adult or talking to an adult. They are Mr. and Mrs. And these trick words are abbreviations, which means we're taking a big long word and we're shortening it to a couple letters. So in Mr. and Mrs., kind of the whole thing is a tricky part because you just have to remember the letters that we use to abbreviate Mr. and Mrs. So Mr. is easy, it's just two letters. M-R, Mr. So really we could put our heart under the R because the R is kind of representing a lot of sounds. Now, since it's an abbreviation, we put a period right there to show that we took all the letters, we smushed them together, and we're stopping. There's no more added on. And it has to be capitalized because it's part of a name. So these two trick words, Mr. and Mrs., always get capitalized. And then if you can spell Mr You can pretty much spell Mrs. It's exactly the same, except we add an S to the end. So I put my period to show it's an abbreviation. We can put our heart under the R and the S, and the M stays capitalized because it's going to be part of a name. And Mrs., you use that if an adult woman is married. If not, you just say Miss. Mr., any man is a Mr., whether they're married or not. All right, we have one last trick word. It is own, like you own something. So let's tap it out. O. Now this one isn't too tricky if you remember the correct vowel team that says O. It's going to be O-W in this word. So we can mark it with a heart because it is a little tricky to remember. O-W is saying O, and then what do you think is saying N? Yep, just an N. So the only tricky part is the O-W. So once again, those trick words we just practiced were people, month, bin, little, want, Mr., Mrs., and own. Can you try to keep practicing reading and writing these?